Hello and welcome to the Pop Off PC Mag's show where we talk about video games, the industry, trends, games we're playing, all that stuff about our favorite interactive art form. I'm Jordan Miner. I'm joined by Alexis Ned from Mashable.
Hello.
And we're going to talk about superheroes because no matter what medium, TV, movies, video games, we just can't escape them. And we're a bit of a moment where lots of big superhero games are either being announced or about to come out. So, we're going to talk about that. First off, it was the DC Fandom a couple of days ago where we saw trailers for all sorts of movies, the Batman, Suicide Squad, all that stuff. But also, we got two very big DC game reveals. And Alexis, I know you're a big fan of the Batman Arkham games.
Yes, love the
So,
Arkham games.
so were you excited by these reveals from the fandom this weekend?
I was kind of surprised to see the direction that Gotham Knights took. Just the fact that it's so based in multiplayer, since none of the other Arkham games have been multiplayer because Batman works alone.
Yeah, but now Batman is dead.
Yeah, but now Batman is dead, and now it's up to the Knights. I'm excited to play as Batwoman. I'm super excited to finally be able to play as Nightwing. I'm a huge Nightwing fan.
Yeah, that's the one from WB Montreal who did Arkham Origins, and we were kind of waiting to see what they had for a while. Yeah, so it's 4 characters, but it's only 2-player co-op. It seems to be, and yeah, kind of taking some of that Arkham, that Arkham universe sort of aesthetic and combat, but more like when people are like the attacks, there's like numbers flying off of heads, so it's like an action RPG. I think what they're trying to position it
Yeah,
as.
I was very surprised to see that in the gameplay. Well, they said it was a pre-alpha build, so who knows what the final version might totally look like. But it did seem a lot more RPG-y. It was a little not. Well, I will say strange because the aesthetic was so clearly pulled from the other Arkham games that to have like these other elements all of a sudden in there, it makes me think of what else is going to be different about these. As far as like, is it going to be fully free flow combat? Are we going to have fear takedowns, stuff that I think is like very crucially Arkham series?
Yeah.
I guess we're going to have to wait to find out. But it looks like they've taken some time to take what's good and then tweak and add some things.
What I'm more curious about is just how the game is going to be like structured, because we'll get into this more when we talk about Avengers. But yeah, I'm kind of concerned that it's going to be like another kind of game as a service, which is just a huge trend right now. And I can totally see how like, oh yeah, that like is going to be like a raid, like the whole Mr. Freeze storyline is going to be like those are story missions and like a raid or whatever. But there's also going to be like just kind of more generic stuff throughout the city, which that combined with the RPG elements could be something that I'm not super into. But again, like Arkham's combat, I think could lend itself pretty well to that kind of format potentially. But I don't know. How do you feel like that kind of structure potentially?
I'm not super nuts about about this particular. Well, even though it's not part of the franchise, but like that particular aesthetic going towards the games as service model, because for me, when I play the Arkham games, like I want to fully live in my moment of being a defender of Gotham, and just the idea of like having to get a bunch of people together to take down the Mad Hatter. I'm like, that's not really going to super feel like a Batman game to me. But they also might not go in that direction since so many other games have. They might not want to be too Avengers-y, especially since Avengers is coming out next month, and this is supposed to come out next year, 2021. But yeah, I know it's a trend, but someone's got a bucket, and I hope Gotham Knights is one of the ones that bucks it.
Yeah. The idea of grinding in a game like that, while it could, stop people from trying to get in, which is what they really want for these kinds of games.
Please don't make me dig up a bunch of loot boxes where it's like, oh, I got this super purple Nightwing armor this time.
It's like that's how Batman's will. You're just finding these boxes he left for you out the city.
But you have to solve puzzles. It's like the Riddler really got to him in that last game. Now he's just hiding stuff all over the city.
You mentioned this too. So this technically isn't in the same universe as that Arkham stuff, even though it kind of could be. I guess spoilers for Arkham Knight.
I've spent a not small amount of time since DC Fandom trying to figure out if either of the DC games they told us about take place in the Arkhamverse. And either of them could, and either of them have a good reason to be. Because in both of them, it looks like it's kind of relatively bat-free. Bruce Wayne / Batman did die in an explosion at the end of Arkham Knight, which they reference at the beginning of the Gotham Knights trailer. I hope that at least one of them is. I'm not going to lie, even if they don't have the same voice actors or anything. I like the Arkham story, and also it would be really cool if the Jason Todd in Gotham Knights was the Red Hood from Arkham Knight, or the Arkham Knight from Arkham Knight, because it's like then you get a whole redemption arc built in.
I guess maybe the kind of last big story bit that we saw teased, and this is how they were teasing this game for months ago, because we kind of knew this game was coming for a long time, and even who was making it. But the last bit that was kind of teased at the end was this Court of Owls stuff. That's a relatively recent kind of major Batman villains.
Yeah, I mean it's not like 1960s rogues gallery, but it's I'd say relatively recent compared to how long Batman's been around. But they're an amazing element to include because, I mean, who doesn't love a super secret cabal of bird-themed psychopaths that are trying to take over Gotham with all their, it's a bunch of evil Bruce Waynes and evil Thomas and Martha Waynes.
Cool. So that's going to be the kind of the big villains in this one. But speaking of villains and speaking of their other game, they also announced Suicide Squad: Kill the Justice League.
Yes.
For 2022 from Rocksteady. Next gen only. Gotham Knights is going to be on PS4 and PS5, Xbox One, Series X. But this is 2022, next gen only. We just got a CG trailer where they're in, I think it's like Metropolis, like a colorful, like a more like Metropolis in the daytime.
Yeah.
Deadshot, Black Deadshot, which I appreciated. King Shark, Harley Quinn, and Captain Boomerang. But yeah, this one we know even less about. So where you at on that?
I've been hyped ever since they announced it. I do think that Evil Superman needs a little bit of a break.
Especially in video games?
Yes, especially in video games. But hey, the game's not coming out until 2022. We might forget all about Evil Superman by the time that happens. I love the way that they were interacting in the trailer. I think that they pulled kind of the very few good humor elements from the Suicide Squad movie and put them in there.
Right. Well, hopefully they'll have the Suicide Squad too to kind of take some inspiration from.
Yeah. And I liked Harley's character design a lot. It seemed way more Birds of Prey than it did Suicide Squad because her Suicide Squad outfit was a crime. And it was just like so male gazy and super cheesy. So to see her with she's got her hair in buns, she's got, tactical pants, she's got a vest, and she's, ready to kick ass.
I think Rocksteady kind of got some criticism for her designs in some of those early Arkham games too.
Yes, and even in their most recent, in Arkham Knight, she's in, a bustier and a tutu. And I'm like, come on, guys, we're a bit past that. So I was nervous to see what they would do with her, considering the last Harley that they had. Which
also considering the ways they're in the news lately these days.
Yes, yes. So I was really happy to see her character design. King Shark also, it's really hard to make an anthropomorphic shark look like a fun, normal person that anyone could be talking to. And he looked great. I love the way he looked. And as you said, Black Deadshot, super down with that. It's exciting. A lot of the choices they revealed in the trailer, even without showing gameplay, makes me think that they've learned a lot and are willing to kind of step forward into a literal new generation as far as, it's going to be PS5, but also as far as, not going in the wrong direction with design things.
Now, the little gameplay things we do know, it makes it sound like it's going to be more of a shooter potentially. Just the nature of those characters and like the kind of co-op elements. That could be interesting and different from them, considering that the Arkham games were very melee focused and kind of did a lot, innovated a lot there. So them doing a kind of like a wackier like co-op shooter thing, I think could be interesting.
Mm-hmm. I'm not a huge fan of shooters. I'm much more of a melee player, RPG player, action adventure, stealth kind of person. So I'm hoping, and they probably will give you more options in the game if you want to play as, Harley Quinn with, I'm hoping, a bat, giant sledgehammer, like different weapons like that. Or, almost all those characters use guns. So I'm hoping that if it does go in that direction, there's enough variety and options for us to be able to choose how we want to play our heroes. Well, play our villains, technically.
Mm-hmm. So you think kind of adding those kind of different kind of weirder elements could like make a shooter like more palatable to you potentially? That's something I like
Yeah,
about like say like Overwatch. Like it's a shooter, but the characters have a lot of very weird abilities that don't
yeah,
just come down to how well you can shoot a gun.
exactly. Yeah,
I'm
if my success in a game is determined on my ability to aim at all, I'm already toast. So
I was
just
looking
for
at
my enjoyment and able to complete the game, I hope there are other options.
I was looking at Rocksteady's previous games, and before the Batman games, they made a first-person shooter where you are a riot cop. So
Oh,
you could draw on that in some ways,
hmm.
maybe not some other elements, but they do have some experience making a shooter. Urban Chaos Riot Response is the name of that game.
I've never heard of that game, but I feel like it's been on purpose. I've
Yeah,
never
they threw
bothered
it in
to
the memory
look.
hole.
Oh
Um,
dear.
that's another kind of game though. The Suicide Squad game. If it's like a co-op multiplayer, a co-op kind of shooter like that. That's something that could also lend itself well to being a game as service. So I would hope
Yeah.
that they're not both that. Although they could very well end up
Yeah, they
being
both could be. Hopefully, it's one or the other. But I
that.
mean, that does seem to be a trend, especially specifically with hero games.
Yeah. So that's a
Like
very good.
yeah, like there's a reason Batman is my favorite superhero is because he's, yeah, he's a dad with like a billion kids that keep getting crap kicked out of them, but also like he's a lone wolf. I like playing video games by myself.
Yeah.
So if all the superhero and supervillain games are now going to be like must have other people to complete and potentially in shooters, I will be very confused. That does not really seem to be the soul of a lot of the heroes that I love. Well, we'll always have Miles Morales.
So there's two very good transitions there. I'm going to do the one to the Avengers. That game is going to be a game of service. It's coming out in just a couple of days. Marvel's Avengers, a big AAA Avengers game they announced forever ago. It's finally coming out. Have you played it?
I played the beta.
Okay, I also played the beta.
I played about 2 weekends of 2 weekends of the beta. I didn't have a chance to use the multiplayer part of it. I have some friends that did, and they said the game really clicked for them in there. I wasn't super impressed up front with the beta. It seemed like too small a snippet to really like whet my appetite for the full game. But there was enough cool stuff in there where I'm looking forward to the full game because I think that the single player campaign has a lot of potential. And when I am able to do the multiplayer, I want to be able to be good enough to not be the Iron Man that's dragging my team down.
Right. Yeah, I also played a lot of the beta just in single player, and yeah, there are parts of it that I liked for sure. There's some of the depth of the combat options for the characters do make them feel different. Like it's interesting to see the way they try to like find solutions for like everyone needs a projectile attack. So for the Hulk, he's like ripping up parts of the ground and throwing them, and then Kamala Khan, Ms. Marvel, is just like throwing her big embiggened hand. That is cool. And some of the aesthetic, like I like the I think they called the war zones, where it's kind of like a more open area, and you're kind of like busting you're busting to these bad guy layers. That stuff I thought was kind of neat, but I'm not into Destiny. I mean, no one's into Anthem. The idea of like having to like grind for loot in a superhero game is kind of counter to the power fantasy to me in a lot of ways. Like for Hulk,
totally agree.
like for Hulk
felt so underpowered.
Yeah, and his gear is like, for Iron Man, it makes sense. Like, oh, the gear, he got a new repulsor way or whatever. But like the Hulk, his gear is like, oh, you like upgraded his skeleton or something. So like even in lore, it kind of doesn't make a lot of sense.
I'm like, are we experimenting on the Hulk in real time?
Yeah. So that really didn't do a lot for me.
Yeah, there were a couple of square peg round hole moments for me where it's like I get that this is how that kind of game works, but the fantasy of being a superhero probably should not be about that. But we'll see how they make it work in the full game.
And we'll see also just the ratio of story missions to this beta had a lot of just kind of generic repeat these kind of missions. So we have to see the kind of balance of that stuff too. But it got me to go back and play a little bit Marvel Ultimate Alliance 3, which came out last year, which I think I probably like a bit better. And I was trying to figure out why. And part of it's aesthetic. Parts of this Avengers, like the characters look good in this. Well, I mean, technically they look good. You can talk about like they're kind of bootleg quality. But it's like
listen, there would be so much more money if they could use the Avengers we know and love and massive copyright issues. So
Right. But like they're like
there you
high
go.
fidelity, like they're like detailed. But lots of other like kind of enemies and environments I think are just kind of boring looking. So I thought I like Ultimate Alliance 3's aesthetic a bit better. But also like its combat, while dumber, I think lends itself better to that kind of thing. Like in like this, the combat option's deeper, but like there's a point where I'm like, I'm learning all these moves and stuff, but in the end, I'm still just kind of mindlessly fighting guys anyway. So the amount
Mhm.
of like thought I'm putting into doesn't it doesn't seem worth it in the end when it's still just
Yeah.
like a Dynasty Warriors thing kind of.
There's a point where I would just bust up into a room and just Hulk jump until everyone was dead.
Yes, that's kind of like an uncanny thing for me. But game's not out. You know, we can't judge the full beta yet, so that'll be out pretty soon. And you know, you just mentioned if you're looking for that big single player superhero game on your next generation console, we got Miles Morales coming out this holiday with PS5. We already kind of did a show about that when we were talking about just the PS5 in general, but you were
Mhm.
on that show. So any thoughts on that? Kind of as the last thing here.
Oh, I mean, I'm super looking forward to Miles. Like I said, I like my heroes kind of lone wolfy. I like being able to fully embody the fantasy. I'm a huge fan of the character. I mean, he's I think the only not even hero, but only character who is like me, where it's black dad, Puerto Rican mom, and
Oh,
also
there you go.
is a
Yeah.
superhero. So as far as representation, I never thought I would get that
Yeah, that's
precise,
the
that
bullseye.
very specific
Yeah.
level. Like I never expected it, but I got it, and the character is amazing. I loved Spider-Man PS4 so much, and just being able to put Miles in that environment and have it be like Christmas in New York, which we're probably not going to get this year. You know,
Right.
I have to live through that somehow. I cannot wait to see how the PS5 uses their new technology to make his powers feel more interesting and dynamic. I watched something about how they're doing like the Venom strikes will have like haptic feedback through the controller, and I'm like, yes, give me all of this. I need this very much.
Cool. So yeah, so no matter what superheroes you're into between now and next 2 years, there's something coming out for you. So look forward
Somebody's
to
got you covered.
yes, look forward to that. I'm wearing a shirt with Darkseid on it, so maybe we'll get maybe one day
Who
a
knows?
cool New Gods game, maybe with that Ava DuVernay movie. But yeah, look forward to all that. Alexis, thanks so much for joining us here.
Thanks so much for having me, Jordan.
Yep, and then thanks for watching, everybody.